Hello, versus Spell, and welcome to part 9 of What If Asta Was in Fairytale, our current flagship What If series that has been doing fairly decently. Now, if you want to go straight to the What If, I will be having to put chapter sections in this video, since I do have a couple things I want to touch on. If you don't mind about a couple little bits of news before we get going, then continue to listen. Shouldn't take us too long. Now, first off, I do have to say that What If Asta Had the Sharingan Part 2 has underperformed. Only 29 views at the time of me recording this. And it hasn't gone up in, I want to say, a couple days. So, yeah, it's drastically underperformed. So I'll be trying out some new ideas to try to find another flagship What If, and What If Asta Had the Sharingan will be getting moved to the back row, just like What If Midoriya had dimensional magic. Other than that, I would just like to say, can at least someone else check out Anime What If subreddit. It's not it's Anime What If subreddit. Link in the description. I have been trying to market this to people for the last few months. Yes, that long, and no one else has checked it out. Why? I don't know. I thought it would be a nice thing for the What If community to get behind, but apparently not. Alright, now since it's been a while, previously on the What If, our team made it to Galuna Island, where they discovered that Moondrip was being used to free a demon of Zareth. So they decided to attack the cultists. They were forced to flee after a confrontation with the Cold Emperor, where Natsu was frozen, but he was freed, and Gray was knocked out. So we start with our gang of Asta, Natsu, Gray, Lucy, and Happy in the village recuperating from the retreat. Natsu and Asta would be arguing on what their next action would be, with Natsu wanting to go there and punch them, but Asta disagreeing, thinking that they should regroup or try to attack the temple directly, perhaps destroying it. Which Natsu seemed to like, but before he could respond, Gray would wake up. They would ask him who Leon was, and he would explain that his old master was the one that sealed Deliora, and Leon was her other student. None of this would be changed from canon. Gray would then say that Leon's his. He's the one that needs to stop him. With Natsu disagreeing, but Asta just asking him if he thinks he can actually win. Gray nods, saying that he's cool-headed now and that he should be able to defeat Leon. As they come up with a plan, Natsu will try to disrupt the Moondrip ritual as much as possible, and Gray would confront Leon, and Asta would confront any of the remaining lackeys. Lucy would just ask what she and Happy should do, but Asta would tell her that they need to protect the village in case the cultists decide to attack it. Lucy agrees. As they set off from the village, they would go to the Temple of the Moon, and when they got to the third floor, Asta and Gray would confront Leon, Natsu not being with them at this time. Leon would ask if they really think the two of them can defeat him, the Cold Emperor, with Gray just telling him that Asta's not even going to be fighting him. He will defeat Leon by himself. Leon would chuckle at this before preparing to fight, telling Gray how pathetic it is he still uses two hands to cast his spells. But before the fight could get going, a crystal ball would head right for Gray's head, but quickly be blocked by Asta, saying that just because he's not going to interfere in Gray's fight doesn't mean he's going to let anyone else interfere with it. As a man with a green mask walks out. As this fight begins, Leon and Gray would start going at it. Maker Magic versus Maker Magic. Shield versus Snake. Cage versus Tiger. so on and so forth. And Asta would begin blocking the magic of the masked man, as he kept shooting crystal balls at him, while Asta kept having to break them. But they would keep reforming. But 1 minute of the fight starting, the temple would start shaking and slanting, as everyone would have to stop their fights for a second to regain balance. Asta thinking that Natsu went a little overboard. But if they slant the entire temple, it should at least make it harder for them to perform the ritual. As the masked man grimaced and set his hand on the floor, as the floor quickly decayed under them. Asta and the masked man fell. The masked man just told the cold emperor that he was going to leave the other one to him, as Leon and Gray's duel would go the same as canon. So, back over to Natsu at the first floor, he was looking over his work of destroyed pillars with pride, until a number of rocks nearly fell on his head. Asta and the masked man fell from the ceiling. Asta both catching themselves, landed. Natsu would just ask, he was trying to kill him with those rocks. As Asta just said no, it was this guy's weird magic. As the masked man would just explain that he wields a forgotten type of magic, so powerful it was forgotten from the pages of history. Wheel of Time. With Natsu not recognizing the name, and Asta having a look of concern. He had read about some types of ancient magic and remember hearing something about certain types of time magic, and that they're incredibly dangerous. But they typically weren't very effective against living things. As the masked man simply put a hand on the floor, recovered the ceiling from its hole, and repaired the temple, all in a matter of seconds. Natsu looked shocked at the man's ability to just right everything they had done, but he would just tell the masked man, "Fine, I'll just have to destroy it again." As the masked man, still with his hand on the floor, would decay the floor again. Before Asta would try jumping forward to stop him, but it was too late. All three of them were plummeting into the caves holding Deliora, as they all landed precariously, as a fight would begin. Going back to the village, Lucy had Virgo dig a large pit to stop anyone from attacking the villages through their gate. As she stood outside the gate, Happy asked her if she thinks this pit trap will actually work, with Lucy just saying, "Yeah, it is, no kidding." As about 15 cultists came out of the woods. They had torches and what seemed to be jars of oil, preparing to burn down the village. As they would start their fight, she would summon Virgo and, well, they're cultists without much magic. Almost all the strong individuals in this group were defeated last part when Asta and the gang fought Leon at his camp. So they would go pretty quickly. She even managed to run back into the town and trick a bunch of them into falling into the pit, where a bunch of the villagers grabbed rocks and sticks and started just beating up the cultists. And Happy would also be dropping rocks on their head by flying them incredibly high up. The cultists surrendered within about 2 minutes of this, so none of them died of, well, rock bludgeoning. Back down to the caves, where Asta, Natsu, and the masked man were fighting, as fiery fists were going off, and a black sword was cutting through the crystal balls, as masked man had created over a dozen crystal balls to all attack them at once, as they kept trying to dodge, but they kept getting hit, as Natsu used the fire on his feet and shot forward, taking his fist and bringing it back and preparing to hit the masked man. The masked man would jump away and uses magic to force part of the roof to fall in, forcing Natsu to jump back. Natsu would just tell Asta that it's time to pull out that little trick he's been working on, as Asta nodded, as he brought up his demon devourer sword. As Natsu, Lucy, Happy, and Gray's marks would light up. As Asta said, "I hope you don't mind if I take some of your magic." As the magic all was forced into the sword, as he released it, the masked man would bring all of his crystal balls in for defense and leaped away. The crystal balls were destroyed, along with the stone the man was standing on, but he jumped back, chuckling, saying, "You missed, you fool," as Natsu jumped in and gave him a punch, as he sent him into the wall. Gray would come through a side passage a minute later, panting after his battle, as Leon would actually come out, barely able to stand a minute later. Gray had beat the crap out of him, but he was still somehow moving, as a purple light would come from the ceiling. Leon, behind them, leaning against the wall, would chuckle, saying, it only takes a couple people to perform the moon drip spell, and that this is a potent form of it. Deliora will be freed in a minute. As the ice cracked, Gray prepared to use Ice Shell against Deliora, before Asta and Natsu stepped in front of him, telling him that at least let them try to fight him before he pulled a suicidal move like that. As both prepared to fight Deliora, the ice would crack and Deliora would let out a blood-curdling roar that even Urza could feel on a boat miles away. As Natsu prepared to fight it, as Asta prepared as well, Deliora would bring down a magically imbued fist, as Asta would bring up his sword and defend. But as soon as he hit the sword, Asta expected Deliora's magic to be sent back at him, but he wasn't expecting Deliora to begin cracking and breaking apart, as they were able to put together the truth. Or their master had been slowly weakening Deliora. What they saw was just simply a few minutes of life left in him. If they had left him in there for a year, the ice would have probably broken apart on its own since Deliora was dead. Leon yelled that he would never have another chance to surpass war, with Gray kicking him in the gut. You have to admit, Leon was a jerk here. And as the group left, Leon would begin rethinking his life. Back at the village, they had successfully tied up the cultists and proceeded to put them outside the village with a sign that said, "I think these are yours." As when the guys got back, the village would still be asking them why the curse hasn't been lifted. As Asta would explain that he believes that the town they're actually in their natural form. The moon drip caused the unnatural side effect of memory loss, or at least that's what he thinks. As the fisherman who took them there would fly down and just say that Asta actually had some really good recognition, as they would have a tearful reunion. As Lucy would just ask Asta, "Why is the moon purple then?" Asta would just respond that he can only assume that's a side effect of the moon drip, and that it was having a negative side effect on them. And then the villagers would throw a party in the team's honor. Leon's lackeys would come by and apologize, like in canon, as they would be offered to stay, but they didn't feel it was right. But only 30 minutes later, the entire gang would just hear Urza yell, "Natsu," in a deep demonic voice. And that's where everyone started to run. Alright, so I hope you liked this What If. This is actually my second time recording. I'm currently in crunch time editing this, so I apologize ahead of time if this seems a little rushed. Other than that, please check out the Anime What If subreddit. Please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment. It does help the channel. And I hope you stay tuned for whatever else other what ifs I come up with. Real life's starting to get a little hectic, so my creation schedule might get flipped upside down again soon. So we'll just have to see what happens. This is Spellree, signing off.